Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your host, Des Kennedy.
Hi, welcome to Momentum. This is Des and Tim here, and today we're talking with Richard Fay. Richard was on our show some time ago, and in fact, he did the first two shows of Momentum, so his claim to fame is that. And so we now have Richard back, and we've got a couple of shows around what Richard has to say to us. And he's got a wealth of experience as a counsellor and as a pastor, and has seen the worst and the best of most things, including men. The one thing we want to talk about today, and welcome Richard, I should say.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here, Des.
Yeah, thank you. One thing we want to talk about today is identity, and men struggle continually with their sense of identity and what that looks like. How would you define identity, Richard?
Identity is such a mystery. And so there are a couple of ways that it can be defined. And the first is that we can construct it ourselves. We construct it based on what we can achieve, what we can do, what we can prove. For men especially, it's often a competition or a comparison. Who has the most of something, whatever you value, whatever you think makes you look successful, and so you build an identity. So many men build an identity out of achievement, out of career. But those identities depend on your performance, on your ability to sustain them. And if you can't sustain them, or if in any way you fail, then of course your identity is threatened, and then it tends to crumble. So that's not a true identity. Any identity that is dependent upon your ability to be able to maintain it is not authentic, because it's not indigenous to you. If it's indigenous to you, it's natively true no matter what's happening to you.
Yeah,
so that's the thing I wanted to say first about identity. And so men who have fragile or inauthentic identities will end up saying at some point in their life, I'm such an idiot.
Yeah.
Or why did I do that? Or I'm a loser.
Yeah.
Or I feel like such a fraud. And that is what happens when our identity is formed by something inauthentic. When it's authentic, it's solid, it's reliable, it's dependable, and it can absorb all of life's emotions, ups and downs, and roller coasters, and it's relational.
So when do people form their identity, do you think?
Well, I think we, particularly we men, we form it at different times. And the first identity we form is the most precious and sacred one, and it's what we form in the first few years of our life. If we have a loving mother and father, then we know we are loved for who we are. And that's a very secure identity. Then our identity shifts to adolescence, which is me showing off, possibly in front of girls, and certainly other boys, trying to say, hey, look at me, I've got what it takes, I'm the dude, I'm king of the mountain. Then our identity shifts again in our early 20s to the warrior. I'm in a cause greater than my own. Every young man needs a cause greater than himself. He needs to know that there's something bigger than him that matters, and he's going to give himself to it. That's the warrior. Then there's the king identity. I've got a wife or children, a career, employees, a home. I've got a role, a purpose in life. So then I've developed another identity. Those identities keep happening, but then we keep falling back to what is the original identity, which is I'm beloved. And once we grow out of childhood, we will eventually circle back to that. So for me, identity is I'm a beloved son of God. That is your identity too, Des.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is no other one. And if that is true, then that is eternally true. It's true of every aspect of who I am. It's not one. Jesus heard that voice. Others heard that voice. This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. And it wasn't based on anything he'd achieved or done, because it was before any of his ministry. He's a carpenter.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about the positive identity in terms of our faith and our relationship with our Heavenly Father. What would an unhealthy identity look like?
An unhealthy identity is one that you are always patching or hiding. Patching, look at me, I've made it, I'm the guy, and it's often quite unconscious, so you don't even notice you're doing it. You just talk about, I bumped into a man recently, and he was telling me about his wealth, and he went on and on about his wealth, his investments, and how well they were doing. And I asked him how he was, and that was his response.
Wow.
That's an unhealthy identity, because that man was not a young man. He was a much older man. And his sense of success was wealth, because he was now retired. And so it wasn't based on his career, which it once was. So that's an unhealthy identity. That's one that you try to cover over the cracks with some veneer. Or the other one is one that you medicate with drugs, alcohol, porn, any addiction. One that causes you to be reactive if anyone challenges you. So if a man hears his partner, his wife say, "You're just like your father," or that can be, "You're just like your father." Just those words. And if a man goes to rage, well, then you know where his identity is.
Yeah.
It's, "I don't want to be like my father, and you just told me I am, and that's terrifying, and so I have to get angry because I'm not secure in who I am."
Yeah. So what sort of traits would indicate that, maybe we're lacking in our identity? What sort of things would we see? I mean, you've just described one of them, for example.
Yeah. What is the internal self-talk? Because the internal self-talk is, "Oh, here we go again. Got to put on the suit, got to fake it, got to pretend, don't let anyone see who I really am, who you really are as a beloved son of God." And that means you can be vulnerable, you can be transparent, you can be honest, you can even talk about, wisely and appropriately, your failures to the right people, and you're okay still. "No, I'm a failure. I failed at that." Well, that's okay. Everyone fails at things. Everyone.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
No, isn't it wonderful to know that I don't have to be completely successful to be secure in who I am? So
yes,
that
exactly.
internal self-talk is a sign that there's an unhealthy identity. There's so many signs. As I said earlier, any kind of addiction is a sign of an unhealthy identity. Any sense of anxiety or stress in the body, or depression, they're unhealthy identities. They're simply a way of saying something's happened in your life, or a lot of things could have happened in your life, that you have built an identity on that are crumbling. And the wind and the waves of life are crashing in on, and this house of sand is starting to fall down, and that's okay. It's a horrible thing. It's humiliation. It just doesn't say anyone who feels humiliated hates that feeling.
Yes.
Shame is the most horrible feeling. Shame is the litmus test. When I feel shame, it's usually because I feel like I am bad.
Yeah. Yes.
Or possibly I have just acted in a way that's completely against who I am. And it's a wake-up call. Richard, come back to your values.
Yes.
Who are you really? Who are you really? Act on your values, because you're acting like someone you're not.
So we're talking to Richard Fay today, counsellor and pastor, and an all-round good guy who has done lots of things in life. Just we're talking about identity and men's identity in particular. So given there might be men listening to the show today, Richard, who are struggling with their identity, they're broken, they didn't have role models, they didn't have a mother and father who loved them, and whatever those circumstances look like, how can they start to change the way they think, the way they talk, that leads to a new identity?
That is just about the best question I've ever been asked. That's probably the most important question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the first would be to be kind and gentle to everything they experience within them that says they're not good enough. Be kind to it. Now, this is going to sound a little odd, what I'm going to say here. But if they could understand that's not who they are, but that is what the younger self believes about them, and the younger self keeps showing up. There's a poem by Robert Bly called One Source of Bad Information. Robert Bly was one of the fathers of the men's movement many, many years ago. And he said, there's a boy in you about 3 years old who hasn't learned a thing in 30,000 years. There's a boy in you about 3 years old who hasn't learned a thing in 30,000 years. And he's trying to save your life. And because of him, you have survived a lot. He says things like stay home, avoid elevators, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
This boy has 6 big ideas, 5 don't work. Right now he's repeating them to you. So the boy or the younger self's identity is what's fragile. And if the man feels his own fragility, and he could turn like a loving adult, like a loving father to that younger self and go, I hear you, but you know what? You're loved.
Yeah.
Why? Because God says you're loved.
Yeah.
And therefore I say you're loved. And if that is true, if he can even do that, just find a photo of his younger self and look at that photo and go, you're not a piece of garbage. You're not. Why? Because I get to say who you are. And I say you matter. Hang around men who are okay talking about their fears, their failures, and you're going to be supported by other men in that space. Because then you're safe to talk about your fears and failures, as well as your dreams and hopes. You can be yourself then. And if you can be yourself around other men, that's the place where it begins.
It's such an important step that, and you raised it clearly, get amongst men where you can be open and honest and raw and talk about your anxiety or whatever it is you're going through.
Yeah, so the question, how are you really?
Yes,
how are you really?
Exactly.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's cool. So we're talking to Richard Fay, and we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in a few minutes to talk about identity in terms of how it works in society.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
Hi, we're back for the second part of our talk with Richard Fay today. We're talking about identity, and we've been talking in the first half about what identity looks like, how you can address it, and so forth. And so if you've missed the first part, please go to our website, momentumaustralia.org, and have a listen to the podcast that will be up soon. So Richard, thanks again for your time. One of the things we want to talk about is how society influences men today. There's lots of stuff going on in our world. There's lots of strange things happening to men and their identity. How do we navigate through that?
It's becoming very complex, isn't it? It's getting more and more complex, actually. I'll just say some phrases out here and notice which gender is getting a sense of threat or challenge to the value or worth of that gender. Me too. Toxic masculinity. Mansplaining. Homer Simpson versus Marge Simpson. Which one of those two do you think is more mature, responsible? Or if I talk about their children, Barton and Lisa.
Yeah.
Which gender has a sense of maturity and responsibility? Which one is stupid and imbecilic? That's the world we live in. Now, I acknowledge that men have caused an awful lot of pain in this world for centuries. Men have started wars. Men have done all kinds of difficult things. But now we live in a world where men feel so disoriented. And we then have all kinds of questions around gender as a construct. And we use terms. And I understand that this is a very complex world. Some people don't want to be called he or she anymore. And so being male, well, the prisons are full of men, aren't they?
Yes, right.
Men are 4 times as likely to take their own lives. Men are 9 times as likely to die in the workplace. I could just keep naming the stats. Men are the problem, apparently. So if you're a man, you almost are apologizing for being male. And if you don't apologize for being male, you suddenly look like some very, very rigid male rights activist who hates women.
Yeah.
As if you can't be you and love your wife and love your daughters and love your granddaughters and love your sisters and your mother, and women in general, want to empower them, as well as having dignity and worth and value in being a man.
Isn't it interesting how society has changed dramatically over the last couple of years? But I remember when I first came to Australia, I got on a train in Sydney, and the train was packed and there was one seat, and I took that one seat. And when a lady came on the next stop, I stood up and I said, "Please have my seat." And I got a torrent of abuse. Because she was quite able to stand and wanted to stand, and I was humiliating her. Isn't it amazing?
And it's a total misunderstanding. I had a female member of my family who said she'd be offended if I opened a car door for her, as I always do for my wife if we're going out. And I said to her, "You misunderstand me. When I open a car door, I'm not saying you're weak. I'm saying my strength is here to serve you."
Yeah,
because otherwise my strength could dominate you. And I don't want it to dominate you, because I've grown up in a world where domination has been unhealthy. And so if I open a car door, I'm reminding you and me that my strength is here to serve you. And physically, I am stronger, at least on the outside. I haven't had to give birth, so I'm sure that there are strengths inside of women that I have no knowledge of.
For sure.
But that kind of chivalry, isn't that an old-fashioned word? But chivalry, here's another word that comes with chivalry and from the same age, gentleman.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say that word.
A gentle man.
Mm.
That's a man whose strength is yielded to others, to serve and bless others. That's a good man. And that man will give up his seat. And even if he gets a torrent of abuse,
And so you look at society and you look at politicians, for example, and the days of the statesman have disappeared as well. Where somebody was stood up and stood for something, and you don't see that in today's society.
I don't know about you, Des, but one of my things my father said to me over and over: your word is your honor. Your word is your bond.
Yes.
And so if a man said it, then, he was going to follow through.
Mm.
That's called integrity.
Exactly. And that's a good word too, isn't it? Integrity.
Isn't it? And an identity and integrity go hand in hand.
Yes.
Because an identity that doesn't have integrity is like a glass, a cup that doesn't hold water. You'd end up wanting to throw it away because it doesn't serve its purpose. Integrity means that my life has enough values and character that it holds life.
Mm. Mm.
That when I say if I commit to something, I'm going to do it. When I say I'm going to be honest, even if I have to acknowledge I failed at something, that's called integrity. Failing at something is not a loss of integrity. Lying about it is a loss of integrity.
So being a healthy man as a entity in itself, and being a man who has identity in Christ in faith, how do those sit side by side?
Well, I don't think they sit side by side. I think I think one is within the other. The man who has a life that is yielded to Christ becomes his whole identity. It becomes his whole reason for being. He's not now trying to prove himself to God. He's letting the love of Jesus permeate every part of who he is. And so then he seeks to follow Christ into the world. And there's a rest in that. My yoke is easy and my burden is light, and you will find rest for your souls. That is so less striving. You watch Jesus. Jesus was not interested in flattery. Good teacher, don't call me good. He knew what was in the hearts of men, so he didn't yield to that flattery. Whenever things started to go really well, or someone would call out, a demon might call out, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, and he'd silence it. He's not after reputation.
Mm.
He's not after importance, prominence. Or when it comes to, don't let it don't rule over others. That's what the pagans do. Be the last. You don't have to be the first because you know who you are. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to win at everything because you're already winning in who you are.
Yeah.
You don't have to win at what you're doing.
Richard, that's so good. We've been talking to Richard Fay about identity. And Richard, thank you very much for your time today. And we look forward to talking to you on the next show.
Thanks, Des.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org.